My name is Steve Sheets. I have been working with VR for a number of years now, along with other development. We have a track with several panels and several discussions. This evening at 7 o'clock,
yes,
Reed is going to be giving a talk on you want to create an XR experience.
Yes.
We have a social tonight, and they're both in this room, 11:30. Just everyone to get together and talk, bring your quest, play games. If not, just enjoy and talk about what you like. And then tomorrow we have another panel discussion, which is the future of VR, which was originally 3 o'clock, and they moved it to 1 o'clock. So please show up for that. We're going to officially start now. Thank you all for coming, especially in the middle of the day like this. Why don't we start with Reed at the end? I'd like you have each of you introduce yourselves and tell you what you've done with VR. And
hi, my name's Reed. Let me think. I got into art and animation in 2007. I've been using all that software suites since then. I got into engineering in 2015. I have an Emmy nomination for stuff I did in Second Life in 2011. I worked on the Army IVEST project, which is basically HoloLens and a combat helmet, and a number of other boutique engineering firms. Right now I work for a defense contractor, CACI. You may have seen their building around here. But yeah, that's what I do.
All right, so my name is Craig Yu. I'm an associate professor of computer science at George Mason University, and I lead a group of researchers working on design computing and extended reality. So we touch a bunch of virtual reality, augmented reality devices and topics. We do research projects on like using virtual reality for training, using augmented reality for storytelling. We create AI-driven tools for helping people to navigate in virtual environments more efficiently, and so on. So I'm happy to share some experience with our R&D projects.
All right. Hi, I'm Thomas Ratliff. I'm an indie developer. I'm actually down in the MAGFest section. I'm working on a game called Party Crashers. It's a local VR party game where one person's in the headset and other players actually join through their mobile phones on a website. So yeah, come check it out if you get some time.
Well, I'm John Nelson. I'm an independent contractor, and I've been around the block doing just about everything, I think. I've worked with Steve Sheets pretty closely, and in the past 10 years or so, we've been working on various little projects in VR and AR.
you're one of the few people I'd say would be an expert with ARKit.
Yeah, you know, I started coding in ARKit, which was once called SceneKit, and this is an Apple SDK, back when it first came out, and I think that was like 2013 or possibly earlier. I've been coding in Unity, Unreal Engine, a number of different platforms. I've coded in OpenGL. I've built a lot of prototype and research level platforms, but Steve and I have been recently working on AR and VR and on Oculus Quest, and I find the Oculus Quest to be a terrific platform. It's the foothold into the commercial market, in the mainstream consumer market.
60% of all VR out there right now is Oculus, which is amazing since they were competing against PSVR, which had a huge threshold.
Yeah, Steve here actually can start off, I think, with the Vive.
Yeah.
You'll have to tell us the stories about the Archer and the Vive. Yeah.
This discussion panel is for us to talk about developing stories, answering questions about development, horror stories, successes and failures, what we like, what we think we should be needing. We won't be talking too much about details and specifics. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there for that, nor will we be talking too much about the future, because again, we're going to be having a discussion about that. We're talking about what it is right now to actually go out and develop and augment. Now, everyone knows what AR is and VR, virtual reality, That's where 360, all completely encompassing, immersive. AR, some level of augmented reality where you're looking at the real world, either through clear glasses like HoloLens or pass-through cameras like the Oculus. XR, you get to choose because XR has about 4 abbreviations. Craig, what do you use? You call it extended reality?
Yeah.
Okay, I've heard experimental reality, yeah, you name it. Oh, and there's also MR, which is basically XR from Microsoft. That's the one they like to use.
There are firm definitions from Unity available on their website. It'll be in my presentation at 7.
Okay. Firm?
Yeah, firm. They're, like defined.
Okay.
With words.
I have to say that one of the things we all got into this for is because this is just fun. It is fun to work with XR and AR. Starting with you, John, going across the table, what's the funnest experiment you ever did?
Ooh, the funnest experiment I ever did. It was definitely VR, not AR. AR, augmented reality, is utilitarian, I think. It does the job. It works for what it's the problem it's going to solve. VR is sort of throwing the kitchen sink at problems. I mean, it's sledgehammering the problem with a all-in-one solution. So anyway, the answer to the question would be, I think the presentation I did for MAGFest in 2020 or 2019 about building your own games in Unity was the most fun.
You had to doing that one. That was Unity using the old Unity kit.
That's right. It was on the bridge of the old Unity strategy as opposed to the OpenXR strategy. They were just in the process of updating the SDK, and it was a nightmare. So in this sense, it was the most fun I had because I was building an immersive world with sound, and this was not just stereo sound. This was spatial sound, sound effects, textures, bots, and it was an entirely all an immersive world. And I enjoyed just sitting there, being immersed in this world of sound and visuals, and just existing in it. But it was a nightmare to code.
Tools have gotten better.
The tools have gotten better. The Unity SDK admittedly was sort of in a nascent stage, but it was a nightmare to code. And even so, coding in Unity, and this is where...
Let's put a spot in that because I have specific questions about Unity versus Unreal and everything.
Okay, so anyway, the short answer is the immersive environment where I could just sit and chill out was the most fun. But it was also the biggest nightmare because the coding was really hairy.
Thomas, I think you're next. No,
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd say the most fun experiment that I've worked on was probably the initial prototype for the game that I brought here today. I was pretty new to VR development as a whole, but I had just gotten a headset and I was having a lot of fun showing people Beat Saber and stuff like that, showing up on the TV. But the problem that I ran into is that it got stale pretty quick, just watching and taking turns. So I wanted to create a game where people could join on their phones. You could just hop in. So my initial prototype was creating a tag game where the VR player you have to pump your arms to run, and the mobile users can connect and chase you around. So that was definitely a struggle. I experimented with a lot of different frameworks, but once I got it and it was working, even though it was just a gray box and it was very simple, it was kind of a magical feeling because I feel like there's not really any other experiences like that out there. So
good story.
Yeah.
Craig?
Yeah, so I think the recent AR storytelling developments at our group is most fun to me because it's really fun to see computers being able to understand the environment and populate the story according to the understanding, right, of the scene. So you're kind of like giving the augmented reality program some kind of human-like intelligence to understand the environment, make use of it, and also tell a story out of it. So you're kind of like they're giving life to the augmented reality characters. So, and of course, there are a lot of hacks, lots of problems still, and we also make a lot of assumptions in our research projects along that line, because there's still many limitations in terms of the recognition accuracy, the time we needed to do the processing of the scene, and so on. But just looking at the results, we are pretty excited, and we believe things can be solved in the coming years when different pieces become more mature.
What's your favorite one?
Mine's a little different. So I was working for the Army on the IVEST project, and I can't even tell you what the experiment was, but I can tell you that testing it involved me riding around in a Black Hawk helicopter with the doors open, doing Nap of the Earth over the Colorado River, and that was awesome. So it's a little different. But
I don't think that's the programming aspect.
That was not the programming aspect.
Yeah.
That was like the
Stay on topic.
Advanced software testing. And then, but I kind of, like I was saying, the definitions for augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, I think they were all marketing terms, at least to begin with, but now they're kind of like coalescing into actual definitions. And the mixed reality development is probably the most interesting for me. But it's kind of like pivoted in my career to systems engineering, because I started with augmented mixed reality type stuff, but the applications I was building were interacting with other larger, more complicated systems. And everything in this field is not well defined, and you will find, if you begin working in it, you'll find that you have to solve problems yourself. You can't just Google the error code, which you can in a lot of the other fields, and I find that challenging and really rewarding and a lot of fun. So, and that aspect of it is fun to me. Just, forging your own way. Like, how do you do this thing? Who knows? Just figure it out and go do it. And that's the kind of thing that I really enjoy.
That kind of segues away in our next question, which was, when you start this out and you say, I'm going to write something in VR or AR, first two questions you probably have to answer is, which platform do you want to pick? What hardware do you actually want to work it on? And second question is, what software development tools do you want? Do you want to use Unity, Unreal, some of the third-party stuff? What makes your decisions nowadays, and why do you pick it that way?
This is all covered in my next thing. This is all covered in my next thing at 7, so there you go.
Well, we're getting other opinions here. Let's start with Thomas. You're very unusual because your software product actually works on multiple platforms.
Sure, yeah. Well, so I started with Oculus just because that's what I had, and in my experience, it seems to be the easiest to develop for, or one of the easiest. And software-wise, I use Unity, again, just because I'm familiar with Unity, but it also has a lot of tools that make it easier to program with VR, and the other nice benefit of Unity is that there's a lot of assets out there that you can purchase, or some that are even free, that make built-in things for XR very easy. For instance, one of the packages we use deals with like grabbing objects and posing your hands on those objects. So there's a lot of stuff like that out there where there's a ton of community support and there's a ton of work already done. So that made it a lot more seamless.
But on the other hand, there's been a lot of people, and I'm looking at Reed here, who thinks Unreal is better because of the more power of that capability.
Depends. Right. Depends on what you do. It's a mixed bag. It's either or. I mean, it really depends. I mean, if you know Unity, don't go ditching it and go to Unreal. If you know Unreal, don't go ditching it and go to Unity. If you don't know either, and you aren't a software engineer already, go to Unity. If you are a software engineer, you know C++ and you know how to handle very large C++ projects, by all means, go with Unreal.
Go to what?
Unreal.
Unreal, didn't hear that.
Yeah, so I can tell from my lab experience, so we have all sorts of toys at the lab, depending on the project. So we use different hardware, software for developing. So typically we use like Oculus Quest, HTC Vive. We also have the HoloLens. We also experienced with the Magic Leap. So it really depends on the project. Right? Sometimes we need eye tracking for our method. Then we go for eye tracking VR headset. So in the past we use a eye tracking headset you called Forth. That was like 2018, but now we are mostly using the HTC Vive Pro Eye that provides eye tracking. So basically, well, because we are a research lab, so whenever there are some new devices coming out, we just buy those devices and try to experiment with that, see what kind of new ideas in terms of the functionalities, in terms of methods that we can create out of those new devices. I think most of the students in my lab use Unity for the development because it's very good for quick prototyping. Of course, for the algorithm side, they mostly use Python because there are lots of machine learning libraries already there on Python, and they figure out a way to let the Unity program talk to Python. So, they can run the program, they can run the machine learning code on Python, and let them talk to each other. So that's the way we work on projects.
Okay, go ahead.
I have a caveat. I would say some manufacturers have picked one or the other. Like Microsoft has basically picked Unity to be. I mean, you can build MR apps for HoloLens with Unreal. Technically, you can. But Microsoft, in my opinion, it's pretty apparent that they pretty much picked Unity, and that is where the majority of their support goes. And on the other end, for Oculus, I feel like they've put more of their effort behind the integration into the Unreal Engine. As in, there's a branch of Unreal Engine that you can, clone, and then that's meant specifically for Oculus.
There was a third option, which was native programming. Unfortunately, Meta
Please don't
dropped
do that. Don't do that. You don't reinvent the wheel.
That's not surprising, because who wants to actually code in native code for VR? Well, good luck to you, because
Well, let's talk about that.
Another nightmare.
We can do everything that you're describing on Unity and everything. I still like procedural programming in a lot of ways.
Steve, I'd like to,
go ahead.
did you just reflect what Craig had said? My reasons for using Unity, which I currently use now, is availability and basically appropriateness of the platform to the task. And rapid prototyping is definitely a good thing, especially when you're in a research environment where you don't care to spend tons of postdoc hours on constructing a VR environment. You just want the VR environment to work. It's better to focus your energy and time on a Python backend, which does machine learning classification and that sort of thing. My reason has been accessibility, but also availability. There was a time when Unity didn't exist, so I had to code in straight AR SceneKit code. Now that Unity does exist, I'm using it as basically a prototyping tool.
Now, let's talk about some alternatives, because there are quite a few people out there who've said no to Unity and Unreal and are using WebVR or other solutions. Has anyone actually worked out here on this table? I wasn't sure. Okay. A little hard for us to talk about that.
In what, WebVR?
Yeah, there are different web-based VR solutions.
Like A-Frame and...
Yes, exactly.
Those don't count.
Thank you.
They aren't real. That's not real.
That's not real.
It's not real.
I think the more complaint about that is that it's hard to monetize it. It's hard to sell it that way.
That's what I'm talking about. Like, you're not gonna, nobody's gonna see your game on there,
Those are mostly for mobile cardboard VR.
No, actually, there was quite a few of them where they're also able to be on Oculus or Vive. So that's not exclusively for the phones. Okay. I thought you did some WebVR for your web-based version. That wasn't done with that?
So the mobile portion of our game is directly done in Unity. So we build it out to WebGL so that it can run in a web page. It is all native Unity. Yeah.
So that's one way solution for doing that.
Yes.
Well,
and your game uses WebSockets.
It does.
And this is related to that decision?
Yes.
I did for background, I worked on a game maybe 4 or 6 months ago, and we were looking at deploying to web with Unity And because it came down to using WebSockets for multiplayer programming, we were like, no. And we just decided not to. Like, we decided not to support web at all because of that, specifically that reason.
So were you thinking of deploying to WebGL with that? Was one of the,
Yeah,
is that one of the
that's
reasons?
what we're looking at. We were
Yeah.
just looking at it, though.
Yeah.
Like, I can show you a little thing on the website. It's just like
Yeah.
this stupid little game I made for it, and like where you can drag things around. But it was just like an experiment. Like,
Yeah.
here's what we can do with the thing, you know. But if we do this, we'll be locking in to this one solution for multiplayer programming, and we're just like, no.
I agree, that's one of the problems I have with that. Besides Unity and Unreal, what other tools as a developer do you think is required nowadays? Blender, some people still value one versus the other. What do you think is the most important couple ones?
So I can speak to both actually, because so my main job, I do technical art, so I deal with programming and the 3D side a lot, and I've been Team Blender for probably 10 years at this point. I don't think there's any reason to use Maya or any of the other complicated systems, and that might hurt some feelings. I don't know.
I'm glad I picked some opinionated people with...
They certainly have their benefits with animation and other tools, but I think for 99% of developers, Blender has everything that you need. It's super easy to get into, a lot to learn, or very easy to learn.
Often as Maya is the industry standard.
I will say, I would like to point out, so I went to school at RIT, and when I first entered, all the 3D courses were taught in Maya, and that's what they were preaching was, Maya is the standard, you have to use it. If you get a job, it's going to be Maya. And through those 4 years alone, it switched.
All right, okay. So I'm a big company, and I need a 3D software suite.
Sure.
But I need support because I'm a big company. Who supports you if you buy Blender? Oh, you don't buy Blender.
Right.
Yeah, so nobody supports you. And that's what they're buying when they buy Maya, they're buying support.
I guess I should say this is from the point of view of an indie developer as well.
From the indie developer.
That's totally fair.
It is the perfect tool. You don't, because, dude, Maya by itself, I don't even know if you can buy a license for it now. You have to buy a subscription. And it's like $200, $300 a month or something like that.
Yeah, it's
A month?
I don't pay for this.
It's
My
pretty
employer
insane,
pays for
yeah.
this, okay?
For a
So
lot of
if you're
people,
indie,
excuse me, for a lot of
by
people
all
here, explain what Blender and Maya gives you, because I don't think everyone knows what you're doing.
They're both 3D modeling and animation software. You can, build, I don't know, like Up or, some Pixar movie like that. But they also, you can take that content and put it in games with both of those software suites. Blender is freeware, like open source software. So if you are an indie developer and your parents aren't bajillionaires, by all means use Blender. But if you're working for a company and they want to be cheapskates, don't let them go with Maya. But you would already know that because you'd already know Maya by that point.
Craig, you're kind of in between the two of them. Why don't you give me your opinion?
We have 4 mics and 5 people. So I just do this mic whenever I want to talk.
I have something to share. Just last week, right? My student, he wanted to create a 3D chair, and we had the same debate, right? Like whether he should try Blender or 3ds Max. So at first, I want him to try Blender, although I'm familiar with 3ds Max, but I know if he is familiar with Blender, he can easily write script in the future to automate something, to create some plugin and try, integrate some of his research into Blender. But turned out he had a really hard time learning Blender just for making a chair, and he tried the 3ds Max and it was much more intuitive for him. So I think Blender just has a steeper learning curve at the beginning. In my opinion, if you want to do something quick, maybe 3ds Max is easier, and there is a free trial version. Not trial version, it's like a free license for students for 3ds Max. So I mean, it's a good choice if you want to create something real quick. I don't know. I mean, there's always a debate between the two.
If someone isn't a 3D artist or an independent developer, is there enough content out there that is free or available? You do not have to use these tools to create that. Unity, for example, has a huge library of files. The Apple's gone with the Pixar standard for files format. Have we reached the threshold point where there's enough data out there?
Yeah.
I see a yes and a no.
Well, you can find millions of chairs on the store. I'm pretty sure.
Right. If you need
But
you got plenty of them.
Yeah, but so I asked my student to create a chair because, first of all, I want him to experience with the 3D modeling process. And another thing is like, he for some reason, he needs to create an exact replication of a wheelchair. So that's why he needs to do it by himself.
We're almost to the point of being able to have a camera walk around the device and have it be rendered without any Mayan.
I've seen that.
Yes, I've seen it too.
Not even almost, it exists.
Yeah, it does.
Only readily available is what I'm saying. Yes, I agree.
You know, Steve, your question just a moment ago sparked something in my mind, and that is you said there's enough data available.
Yes.
Well, you know, to do good AI,
Content.
it's necessary to have, well, a lot of data. But the content, you know, you can get it on the Unity Asset Store. You can get a chair, and maybe you can get several different types of chairs. But if you're doing what Craig is doing, which is classification of vast, you know, prototype objects, you're going to want hundreds of thousands of chairs of different styles and with different statistical parameters. And to do that, I don't think you're going to go to the Unity Asset Store for just that one need. So you're going to need a device that can scan 3D objects in the room. Like, for example, these chairs. Well, you only need one of them because they're all basically clones of each other. But you could take a device, scan the chair, and create a chair object in, you know, no time. And that could go for, you know, your 100,000 chairs of different styles, you know, and Chippendale versus French.
The problem is the scanners are just too high poly. When you try to get into a VR use case, it's too much for them.
That's true in a VR use case, but
There's a lot of work in reducing that. There's a software that Unity just bought called Pixies, and it's meant for CAD models and stuff like that. So traditionally, when you would try to convert that sort of data into something that would be used in the game, it would, like as you said, the polygon count's like absurd. But that software, like I used it a little bit for one of my I had 4 jobs in the last year, and one of them I got to use that software, and their demonstration model was I think it was the caliper for a car, like brakes on a car, and it was like a really complex kind of model with like holes through it and stuff like that. And this thing, it's just like bloop, and it came up with a game-ready low poly asset that had like transparency in the texture to simulate the holes that were in the actual model and stuff like that. And I mean, somebody like I have spent like way more time in my life just laboriously trying to convert a CAD model or something like that into something you can use in the game, and like tears, you know what I'm saying? Like I want to kill myself. I hate this job. I want to go be a janitor at high school instead of this. And now this software just blip does it really quick. So that's amazing. So there's tons of work being done in that front.
Apple maybe do something similar?
I don't know if Apple did. The software I'm talking about specifically, if you're wondering,
Apple does it when you take the camera picture of it. It re-renders it and then tries to simplify it, and does a pretty good job, yes.
Well, I have an Android, so I don't know.
I know you do.
I don't know anything about that, yeah.
I believe Unreal Engine did something pretty similar. Maybe a few years ago, they did a demo where the entire environment was photo scanned, like billions of vertices, and I forget the name of the tool, but they have this new built-in tool that basically converts everything into low poly for you, and it still keeps the topology.
Are you talking about Nano?
I think Nano. Yeah, Nano.
So that doesn't like depoly the model.
Right.
It's just
don't know.
able to render billions and billions of
Right.
polygons.
Yeah, it's
Let's not get too
That does not
technical
work
here.
in XR. Like it won't.
Right.
I don't even think it renders in stereo because I mean I looked at it and I was like, let's render it in
Would you
stereo
say it's
VR.
fair that we're starting to see tools that we can use now? Because
Yeah.
5-6 years ago, we didn't have these tools.
Yeah,
And
no,
now,
no.
importantly, we didn't have the interest to get the tools. So we're seeing it now.
Yeah.
Makes your life easier.
we didn't have the horsepower we have in the devices.
That's also true. And let me ask you horror stories. What did you try once that didn't work? I'll give you an example. Once, yeah. I'll give you an example. John and I tried to do a ARKit where we would scan cards. So you could identify the cards on the table to be able to teach someone how to play blackjack or Texas Hold'em, and that was a disaster. We could identify queens and jacks, but we couldn't identify more than 4 cards at a time, and we couldn't identify face cards.
Yeah, that was probably a limitation of the software.
Absolutely, you got to understand what you're doing ahead of time, because we went back and found the manual and said, oh, limitations here, and we probably could do it today, but then we just...
You absolutely could do that. I'm sure you guys could do it.
We'll talk about
At
it.
the time we did it,
Yeah.
or tried to do it.
No, but that was an example where we got run into a face of what was not possible at that time. What other horror stories have you had that something didn't work out, or I'm sure research gets a lot?
Yeah, lots of those kind of problems, like 3D scanning of the environment. So for example, so we worked recently on the augmented reality storytelling. Well, for the first step, we need to scan the environment, and because we want to deliver the experience on the Microsoft HoloLens, so at the beginning, we were thinking to use HoloLens to do the scanning, but you just get a super bumpy model. It's kind of like a scene after earthquake. So you can't really use that as the input for any type of processing understanding unless you just want to get where the wall is, where the floor is. You can get that, but all the other models are super bumpy. So turn out we need to use the iPad to do the scanning first, and with that, then we let our HoloLens application run on top of that.
Using the depth center, the LED.
Yeah,
depth.
exactly.
The iPad has a very nice depth center.
Exactly. So that's why when I introduced myself, I said we need to do a lot of hacking, right, in order to make our research projects to work, right? So
that was partly probably HoloLens overselling it, because when they first released it, they were showing examples of scanning the room and giving the impression you could tell where the chair was and where the table was.
No.
It wasn't that good.
It's sort of.
It's sort of, yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah. The spatial mapping and through the web portal on the device, yeah.
Yeah, I think it really depends on what you mean by it works, right? Like, it depends on your application, right? If you just want to know, okay, this is wall, this is a ceiling, and spiders should climb on the wall, well, you can. You have enough information for doing that. But if you want very detailed animation, like, oh, this is a chair, I want the character to exactly sit on this chair. If the geometry that you acquire is really rough, then it's really hard for you to position the character, virtual character, precisely.
It would have problems with like this thing.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be
No.
It would just be like a big blob.
Exactly. Yeah. So you don't have any buttons, nothing like that.
Let's change the subject slightly. Who here has done AR versus VR? I know you have, Craig. You have too. Is there a difference between AR and VR and how you structure the program? What's the difference?
Yeah. Do you want to?
I was just the software stack. Like I said earlier, like if you're doing stuff on HoloLens, you want to use Unity. Just because Microsoft has put more support into Unity than they have for Unreal, and you don't want to roll your own solution to anything if you can avoid it. I would say that virtual reality application development is and I'm going to talk about this in my next thing, but it's a subset of augmented reality, because everything you do in virtual reality development, you do in augmented reality development. Like, you're pushing polygons and imagery around, and that's it. In 3D space relative to the user in virtual reality, but in augmented reality, you have to, take into account the physical world that's around the user, and that's a bigger problem. Where is the user located? Where is the user looking? What are they doing right now? That sort of thing. And that's a harder problem, harder nut to crack. And also, in augmented reality, your applications are typically interacting with other systems. Like, I interviewed at a company called Teleportal, because they'd made a really cool augmented reality game for phones. And it's a really cool game and everything, but it's not just a game that you play with other people. That thing is interacting with systems too, because it's kind of like a AR tag game, but it knows where you are because it talks to the phone network and found out where you are, and it knows where your opponent is because it talked to the phone network. They talk to the phone network and let you know.
It's a shared reality.
Yeah, so that's a systems application. That's talking to another system, and so augmented reality is that. And anything that's engaging in mixed reality, augmented reality, I've always found that it is a systems application that interacts with some other system and enhances it somehow. It isn't like, I haven't seen an augmented reality of, Zelda, just a single player game where you just play it by yourself and that's all you do. I haven't seen that, or I haven't seen a compelling example of that.
The only ones I've seen have been in casual games where they just put the casual game on the board, on
What's
the
it
table.
called? Do you know the name of it? Exactly.
No, I don't know the name
Yeah,
of
no, you don't. 'Cause
it. Casual games, you don't remember the names.
Yeah.
So with VR, you're having to do geometry and scene reasoning.
Yeah.
Whereas with AR, you have to do both scene reasoning and geometry, as well as scene understanding.
Yes.
And the
Yeah,
integration of
understanding.
the two.
Yeah. Where is the user? What are they
And
doing?
thus, that's where the AI comes in.
Yeah, and there's a ton of computer vision and a ton of AI stuff that goes into augmented mixed reality development on top of the SLAM that the device is doing to position itself.
So you say AR is more difficult to program than VR?
It is way more difficult and way more involved, and you need way more people, and you need, like, I'll talk about it in a second.
Well, it also involves the design, how can I put it? The design of the system, your workflow, because with AR, it's a different problem than VR.
It is.
VR is geometric reasoning, but also much of it is rendering. Whereas AR, you have to follow the viewer's workflow. We listened to one of Craig's GMU PhD candidate.
Yes.
Yeah, and she pointed out that it takes an understanding of where the annotations are located, where the user is coming from, and where they're viewing the annotations or the scene. It's quite a different problem than VR, which is just 6 DOF tracking. You get your scene perspective and you render and you're done, pretty much, except for physics.
Let's say you get done programming it and you've done testing at least up to the point where you're happy with it. How difficult is it to get into a store or to get it to Sidecar or somewhere else to actually make money off it? Sure, Craig, you don't worry about that much, but the rest of us are here to make money. Sure. Is there any horror stories or good successes that you've had with that? Or I know several of us have tried to get into a money-producing mode. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Thomas. You go ahead.
I can't speak too much on that because we haven't published yet, so we haven't gotten there quite yet. I've heard, quite a few horror stories of trying to get apps onto the Oculus Store and dealing with Meta and their pretty strict guidelines. One thing that I do know that helps with Oculus specifically is there's a software called SideQuest, which a lot of apps start on there. They get a lot of traction and publicity, and I'm not sure if you can actually make money from selling from there, but...
I haven't made a damn cent.
Okay. But it seems
I don't do this for money, though.
Sure.
Well, I guess I sort of do at my job, not this stuff in particular.
Yeah, SideQuest seems to be a good...
You were one of the first people I know to put something on SideQuest, and there's no...
I got 8,000 users, which, cool.
At the time, it was quite a bit, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
But you haven't made any money.
Not a cent. Yeah, not a cent. But I'm glad that's 8,000 people who had a good 10 minutes due to my software for however long they played.
The statistics show that even more than iOS and the App Store, that only a few apps make a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But the majority of them don't, and are break even at best. So you see, try to get one in that position.
I made my game while I was in class with him. He taught me, I went to GMU, he taught me C++ OpenGL programming, and what was the name of the class? It was Visual Computing. Visual Computing, yeah. He was my visual computing professor. But I think it was right before I started his class, I published my game for Quest, on SideQuest. And yeah, since then it's gotten 8,000 users.
What's the game called?
Oh, it's called Blocks Simulator. You build things with Legos, and you can 3D print it when you're done.
Oh,
and
that's awesome.
So like
It was a
the
Lego,
thing
but-
that I was like staying on my tippy toes, and it prints out like this big. It's pretty cool.
My understanding is that SideQuest is sort of like Kickstarter
Yeah,
for app development. You can garner a following, you get a social network going, you sell or try to sell copies of your software, and then you move on to bigger things.
Yep.
Is there any viable money-making solution out there that isn't Quest right now? I mean, is there any other product out there? I'm going to discount PSV.
You could get your game on SteamVR and make
SteamVR.
or like on Steam basically, and make games there or make money there. But that's another process altogether. And if you do that, like the app stores aren't I mean, granted, I don't have a ton of experience because I'm not selling anything, but from the horror stories I've heard from other people, if you, like, there have been cases, and you can't really prove it, so this is all just hearsay, and don't take me to court, okay? But it's like if you put your game on Steam, Oculus may not look at you very favorably to put your game on their store, and vice versa, and that sort of thing, or Epic Online Store. Also, all the stores except basically Epic hit you for 30% of your revenue, and Epic takes 18%. But for some reason, still on Twitter, Epic Online Store is the devil. I don't know. Epic sounds pretty appealing to me, but nobody uses Epic Online Store because nobody uses Epic Online Store, right? Like, so if you want exposure and people to potentially buy your game, you want it on Steam, where they're going to take 30% of your stuff. So, anyway, it's up to you.
I would say Steam has the upper hand, though, because they have vast majority of PC players,
Yes.
which is why they do it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You have 8,000 users, that's a great scratch. Why didn't you monetize it?
I never, so I released it on a Friday, and then I started his class, and all my other classes on a Monday, and then I just never paid attention to it again. I'd occasionally go back and look.
Is it like Gorilla Tag? Like that's kind of a story like Gorilla Tag, but that was like more, do you know what Gorilla Tag is?
No, Gorilla.
Yes.
It wasn't like 8,000 people just jumped out on all at once. It's like so far 8,000 people, 7.9 thousand people have downloaded it so far. And I have never really promoted it outside of just getting on Reddit once and being like, hey, check out my game. I don't know. I have a job. I have 3 kids. I have a lot to do. So it's just not. And I never really made any money before on it, so I never really thought that it would make money if I continued down that road. It would need a lot of work now too. This was like 2019, so it's old.
The ARKit, which is the Apple iOS using your phone or iPad version, it has a real problem with saturation. You get your game out there and you got to be noticed, which is real hard considering thousands and thousands of apps out there on the iPhone. So there hasn't been any really big successes. Not like the Beat Saber on the Oculus, and that might change when Apple comes out with the AR glasses.
I might have had an advantage too, because I released right when Quest 1 came out.
Yeah.
And there was no documentation. I literally tweeted at John Carmack to figure out how to write to internal storage, and he answered, and that's how I knew how to do it.
Well, I have to say, Quest 1, we didn't have a threshold of users to produce money.
Yeah.
It's chicken and egg,
But now it's like if I tried to do what I did with that today, I would be fighting the ocean, and there wouldn't be, I wouldn't have nearly, I was like one of a handful of people who had released, right? So that's why I got exposed.
So would you say if you want to make something like this as a labor of love, go do it, but if you try to make it to make money, it's a gamble?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know you're trying to make money off yours, but...
I was going to say, that kind of sounds like the motto for game development as a whole.
Yeah, but you know what? It's there's little risk of ruin. I mean, what can you lose except your time?
Yep.
Okay. At this point, I'm going to open up to outside here. Do we have any Q&A questions? Sam?
I just want to start by saying that I work primarily in Unreal Engine, but you are 100% valid. I think there are so many great things that you can do, especially with VR and Unity. My question is, we recently moved over to Unreal Engine 5, and there were all these amazing features promised, like Nanite and Lumen and all these things to help with optimization and make everything.
You should have just stayed at 4.27, not gone to 5.
What's that?
You should have stayed at 4.27 and not gone to 5.
That's what I told everybody. That's one of the features. And the thing was that it looked great when it all came out. But then we started working on VR projects, and it was all like, oh, you want to use Lumen? You can't. It doesn't work for VR.
No, it doesn't.
Nanite? No, it doesn't work for VR. But just recently, Lumen is now starting to be supported on VR. And we had worked on these projects, and there were all these issues of it doesn't like water, it doesn't like transparency, and we've been able to work through it. Do you think that if Unreal can get these features actually functional in a VR setting, is it more viable? Because I think it's just hard to get it optimized for headsets.
Technically speaking, there's a difference between most virtual reality and augmented reality applications and what you'd think is traditional games and stuff. There's a deferred renderer and there's a forward renderer in both Unreal and Unity. The majority of the high-end effects require the deferred renderer in Unreal and Unity also. So when you're talking about Nanite and Lumen, I know that I had seen on Twitter somebody had gotten Lumen to work in stereo and run in VR, but I was just like, you're ridiculous, because that's not going to run on anything and that's never going to be in production. Well, not never, but yeah, so you're limited right off the bat just because of that. And so typically all the bells and whistles don't apply. And the only way you're really going to know is if you ask somebody who does know or you know yourself as to where that delineation is.
That's a really good point. Is this documented before you start? I mean, did they tell you these ahead of time?
They don't say it. They don't. You're just supposed to know.
That's ridiculous.
This is a deferred rendering effect, and therefore it does not apply to VR, and you're just supposed to know that if you know that.
They even have like a little tooltip where they try to use it. They're like, nope, doesn't work for VR.
Yeah.
They never bothered to say that.
But it's not, I mean, you're talking about an Unreal Engine also, and their documentation is garbage. It's just not, why do you even provide it?
It's so outdated.
Yeah, well, it's not even out, it's like, yeah, it's outdated, but sometimes you're like, I don't know, the only thing that's worth it
And you
for me
promote
is
this
like
tool.
finding what the header file I need to include is. Huh? What was that?
I said, and you promote this tool.
Well, look, I can bash Unity too if you'd like me to. Okay.
OpenVR and Unity is the same exact thing. They're promoting it, and half the thing isn't working.
Yeah, MRTK3, if you try to use that, you can't use the OVR plugin from Unity that will provide application time warp, which is their solution for low frame rates. So you just can't use it if you use it.
You're going to bash Apple, but Apple's developer documentation is better
Apple's
than
not
that.
even in the space. Apple doesn't exist.
Next question. We had a couple other people raise.
Yeah, so I come from a traditional AAA game development background, but I stumbled into AR/VR due to it was really big when I started my career, and I enjoyed it. But also I am always, to me, as much as limited reality, I think there's a lot of accessibility issues when it comes to when it comes to making money, and we talk about stores and stuff. One thing is Oculus, if you want to go ARKit store, you have to go through accessibility paths. You have to make sure your game is accessible with rules. And that is something from what I've seen is a lot of people from traditional AAA background, they're not comfortable with having to work in a headset that you can either give you a great time or you can give them extremely headache and sickness for a week straight. So I'm curious, how do you navigate accessibility issue? How do you make sure your heart, to me, when I was developing for mixed reality, I always had this fear that I don't want to hurt people, I don't want to harm, I don't want to cause uncomfort, not discomfort, but I don't want to cause pain on people, as a game designer, that is kind of beyond what I'm comfortable with. But I think it's definitely interesting. I'm curious, what are the tips and tricks you've been looking to help making game more accessible? And another caveat about Unreal and Unity debate is Unity is better for virtual reality in my opinion, and the reason Oculus started having more Unreal plugin and stuff is because game developers do not want to work with Unity. They like to work with Unreal because Unreal is better.
I think you're right.
AAA ones, yes, because they have the resources and the team and everything else to do that.
Big studios were like, nah, we don't want that.
Forced to having to offer these tools because they try to go to a larger way that be can you make our game? They're like, no, I'm not touching community.
Yeah.
So, but I agree with you. I don't think it's the ideal way in virtual reality, mostly because of processing limitation that we have with current.
You seem to have two questions there. Let me address one of them, and then I'll let the other one go for you guys, okay? First one is the question of accessibility and having that written from the beginning. Accessibility has been a topic in the software industry in general, a very important one, and we're realizing it's not a bad idea to have that from the very beginning. It makes sense, and not just for the accessibility, but because if you look at accessibility as a feature, it makes your functionality more apparent in your mind of what you're trying to do. Your software is better by having these in mind. So in general, I think it's a good thing. Yes, if you're not used to doing it before, the first time, a few times you do it, but you start getting used to it and you start thinking, these checklist of items actually helps my software. Now the second one is a question about nausea and areas about that. Let's address that. That was one of my questions I hadn't gotten to. 20% of the people out there still get nauseated in a motion game in VR. 10% gets nauseated even if you have a stationary feedback game. Do you take that into account, or do you just blow those users off? Or how do you handle this? I know there are tricks to program that, but is it worth your time to do those? Yeah, you're a good example. Your app has motion that can cause these issues.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, so I mean, I think like motion sickness is definitely one of the most important things to tackle because it does affect a lot of people. In fact, we even had a couple people today that stopped by the booth and didn't even want to put the headset on because they were like, oh, I get super sick with VR. Like it definitely affects some people more than others. There's a lot of tricks, some are simpler than other, but like some of the more simpler things is like don't have acceleration when you move. You can add like a vignette effect when you're moving. You can have snap turning instead of
fuzziness around the edges helps.
Yes, yeah. Or if you're, teleporting something that happens or helps some people is like have it fade to black and then come back, because it's really the locomotion that bothers most people, and most of the mini games in my game actually are stationary, so you're just standing, and that's kind of one of the things we wanted to keep it casual.
For a short time, there was a hot trend that when you teleport and bounce down, which sounds great, except it was getting people really sick, so we don't do that anymore. Remember that? Yeah.
That's the other thing is avoid vertical movement, because that is probably the worst. Yeah.
Anyone else want to address some nausea?
You have a question right there.
Oh, yeah, that's about what you just said. Those tricks, like adding a vignette effect or motion or adding blur around the edges seems like not something that automatically presents itself. So did you stumble upon that because you were looking through research or because you were just like trying a bunch of things and A/B testing?
You and I took a seminar on this a couple years ago.
That's right. I think it emerged organically in the developer community or the community that develops these.
I saw that the moment I got into VR development. It was like blur the outside.
I don't know who's the first one who did.
Yeah.
Yep, that's true.
Now,
yes, there is a section about that.
Getting your app on Oculus Store is like there's a phone book of things you have to do, or a checklist you have to have a bunch of checks, and that's one of them.
I won't say it's not excessive, but some of those things on the checklist are really good.
Yeah, I'm saying some of them should absolutely be there, but I mean, Jesus, there's like a shitload.
As for accessibility, that's just a no-brainer because you want it to be an immersive, natural experience, and having it accessible by people who are disabled and, otherwise compromised.
Yeah, Craig, your talk yesterday and Rohan's talk specifically talked about accessibility and creating up user interfaces that if you can't have good hand motion, be able to use your eye tracking and other things. This is an evolving area, but we are very aware of it.
Yeah, that's going to induce bias in the statistics of your measurement of the performance of your game and how things are operating.
You work with Jake Cartuccio, right? You know him on LinkedIn.
Okay. Oh, yes, now I know.
Yeah, so anyway, a bunch of people I used to work with the guy I just referenced is a guy that he knows who worked at Facebook because he worked with me on IVAS. And,
yes.
But he's a psychologist. And so anyway, there's people, with PhDs who work on specifically just how well do people use these applications that you're building. And all of the big companies like Facebook, they put these PhDs to task and say, hey, make these people play this game and tell us what's wrong with it. Because as a developer, I can do that and I can say, hey, play my game, what's wrong with it? And I will not get the answers I'm looking for. But Jake damn sure will.
And they write up documents for this for us to read, and we do read them.
No, they come up with like reports, and and it will be like, here are all the ways that your software sucks. You know what I mean? You just go read it, and then you can fix it, though. It's good.
There are a lot of really good VR blogs out there that keep up to date with the industry, and you should be looking at these if you're interested, because they post new announcements, new leaks, new papers that come out. Microsoft has a really good lab on VR that pops papers out, as well as Meta. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
Could you list some of those blogs?
I was afraid you'd ask that.
If it's on Google, that's fine. I was curious.
Yeah, they just...
Oculus has its own, if you look up Oculus and Meta, they have tons of blogs.
Xbox has a real accessibility lab, or they do like all kinds of accessibility? but a lot involve mixed reality. And they have a whole course that.
Yes, they do.
There are like a couple of companies that have like their own like external devices to like add on to the XR VRs as well.
Does that work well? It always scares me.
The one thing that I remember the most was like, there's like this like seat, this like egg-looking seat thing, which you basically like have to like move. Like rock cut is hiding like forward and backwards and stuff. I forgot what it was called.
Magic Leap has some, but I wouldn't recommend them the company, but their research is good.
That hits on one of my big complaints about VR today, and that is, we can simulate the audio, we can simulate the visuals. That's a good percentage of the immersion, but we haven't been able to conquer the navigational problems. 6DOF is fine, but when you start needing more real estate than you have room for, I mean, for a true arena,
Yeah, but that depends on the app. If the app is specifically allows motion.
Well, a lot of apps are designed to not use a lot of motion and to not consume a lot of real estate. For example, what is that Oculus app that where you're battling robots, flying robots?
Space Flight Simulator.
Space Flight Simulator, that's right.
Space Pirate Simulator, excuse me.
You're on a platform. Well, the platform is constrained in where you can go. You can't go up or down. You can't go sideways or laterally or forward or backward very far without hitting on a virtual cliff.
The trend, there used to be a company called The Void who did VR arenas. They had it really well designed, like you played the Marvel one, and you teleported from one area to the other by going to Doctor Strange teleport loops. So the actual physical area was quite small, and it was really well designed. So there are tricks to get around that.
It was well designed. In fact, they didn't allow you to take off the headset in the arena, because that would, well, for other reasons, that would break the mystery and the
We're
fantasy.
starting to get in the area of future here, but there is very much a concept of 1 + 1 = 3. If you fool more than one sense at the same time, the person's more immersive.
I think we're about at time, too.
Oh, we're almost out of time? Okay. Do we have any, the reason I'm mentioning is the Void fooled around with projecting heat and sounds at you.
Okay, that's fine.
Last thoughts?
I have a panel at 7 in half an hour, if you'd like to see it. I think we're here, right?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, okay, I'll be right here.
Yeah, so if you are interested in the latest research about like accessibility or like, VR, AR, R&D, so you can check out some papers from IEEE Virtual Reality or ACM SIGGRAPH or ACM Computer-Human Interactions. Those are the top conferences, like, the researchers publish their latest work on these aspects.
I have to say that we have been really good about the academic world in this area getting into the mainstream, because I've been seeing more and more of those papers. 10 years ago, you'd never see those papers. Now being reposted in the more mainstream blogs.
Do they have, I've never really looked for it, there's another source called ARKiv, ARXIV, but I've only ever looked for machine learning AI stuff on there, but I assume the same sort of stuff would be there as well.
Any last thoughts, Thomas?
Also, you could go to GMU and get a CS degree, and he would be your professor. It's what I did. I did that.
Last thing I'll say is just come play Party Crashers downstairs, MIVS section. You'll have fun.
We're going to have a great talk tomorrow, a panel discussion at 1:30?
Yes, at 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock in this room. It's going to concern the futures of VR and XR, and I think you really should come and invite all your friends, invite your family too.
Bring your device if you have it, because we are going to set some up here.
Oh, that's a good idea.
And lastly, thank you for coming, and hope you learned something, enjoyed it. Will you have your hand up? Will you want?
I'm going to say the VR social 11:30 is a reminder.
That was the one I was going to mention, 11:30. And thank you for all my panelists for coming. It's not easy to get up here and talk.